I'm going to be really honest. I'm really hungover right now. I can say this because the professor's not here. And I'm also going to be very honest. I made the slides like 2 weeks ago, so I don't really remember what I wrote down here, but I'll play by the ears. So this is not, oh yeah, I'm just going to click it. So hi, everyone. My name is Sunho. I am a IID graduate, actually. I graduated last year, and I'm currently studying at Georgia Tech, doing a PhD in human-centered computing, which is where Professor Kang Yeona also graduated. And I'm also working as a researcher at the Equity and Sustainability in Computing's lab at Georgia Tech. So back in Yonsei, I double majored CLC and IID, and I took this very class about 7 years ago. So it's really weird being here. But if you want to know more about what I do, and if you want to if you want more, I guess, some guidance on how to get to the States to study more of what we do right now, Interaction Designer HCI, scan the QR code to see my webpage, and you will have the contacts. So please feel free to do so. All right, taking pictures, and I'm self-conscious. All right, so before we move on to the recaps, I'm going to briefly tell you what's going to happen. I'm just not going to use this, all right? Can you hear me still? Cool, yes. So today, the lecture is going to be about, let's say, an hour. I'm not entirely sure, but it's going to be about an hour. We're going to do a little evaluation. We're going to listen a little bit about how to evaluate our designs. And after that, Professor Kang wants us to have a private feedback sessions. So I will go team by team, and then you can briefly introduce where you're at in your design process. And then I can sort of give you some feedback on how it could happen or should happen to, get grades and stuff. So let's do that. All right, a little bit of recap from what I heard when Hayun was here, one of my favorite people in the world. You guys had a lecture on when, how, and why do we evaluate our systems. Do everyone remember what you listened? But so I'm guessing that you're going through your evaluation phase of prototype testing and everything. So you basically evaluated your system or are planning to evaluate your system. By that show of hands, how many of you are going through testing phases right now? User testing, not yet? Who's in the prototyping phase? Okay. So who's planning to do a testing before the semester ends? Everyone should show their hands. Good. Yes. So we're going to listen a little bit about how to you've learned how to conduct these user testings about 2 weeks ago from Hayun. And today I'm going to tell you what happens after we do the user testings. So basically, after testing your products or systems, you need to basically iterate your findings. And of course, there are multiple ways to do this, but this is basically how I usually do them. There are the expected findings of the user testing, and then there's the unexpected findings of the user testing. So in terms of expected findings, they refer to what you already knew would show up in this evaluation. So if you've done a successful research, I'm sure everyone did a fantastic job on their user research, you should have a set of users' values or goals, which means your design solution will be created to help users reach those values and goals, and possibly with design requirements. And this is a slide from Hayun's class 2 weeks ago. So basically, through user study, you should have came up with those user needs, which are translated into those design requirements, which should be the goal of your design right now. So your evaluation should answer whether your design helps users reach the previously shown goals or values. Obvious points, right? So the expected ones are pretty simple. Did your solution allow users to reach your target values or goals? So what are the unexpected ones? The unexpected ones, I refer to them as what you did not expect to see in these evaluation phases. So when you let users play with your prototype, so basically when things don't really go as you expected. So you guys know what usability testing is, right? You took the class 2 weeks ago. You should know this. You basically give your users your product, and you give them basically a scenario to follow. So I don't know, maybe I did a digital legacy curation system for young adults in my capstone project last year. So it's basically letting people curate their digital footprints to make them into legacies after they die. So we gave them the product, and we told them to make this digital legacy using the system, and then they will proceed to use that. And that's how basically usability testings sort of go on to see if users successfully use their prototypes. So as a designer or researcher, you tell your participants to do a certain task. Try doing A. And then your participants like, oh, but I don't know how to. It's not going to show up. Or they might say, they might do stuff and it might not be the right way. So you go like, no, that's not how you're supposed to use the system. In a traditional sense, the users have failed the usability test, and thus your design has also failed. Your design has not helped users reach the intended goal, which means that you have to redesign the system. But there's more to that in a usability testing session. So you tell them to try doing A, and then they are confused on what they have to do. And then they're like, and then you go, oh, that's not how the system is supposed to work. And then the question that should follow after that is, why did you use it that way? What made you confused is the question that you should ask. And then they're going to tell you their side of the story of, oh, like this button was here and I thought it was going to do this, but it didn't really do that. So I was really confused. And that's the point that you need to focus on, which will lead to new insights. Specifically, a direction to prevent failure, just like I just said. So if a user says that this button looks like this, then you know that it shouldn't look like that. And another scenario is you tell the users to do a certain task, and then they're like, oh, but like I don't really want to do that. This seems a lot more interesting, and they go astray into a different task. And then you're like, oh, wait, that's not what we intended, but that's actually pretty cool. We didn't think that to actually happen, but that's a really good way of using. So there are often experiences that goes beyond what we initially planned in the design phase, which will also need to do insights. So the expected ones are that our solutions allow users reach the target values and goals, which is the very basic of why we do user testing sessions. But the unexpected findings give you new insights on how design sort of provoke the users, even though we might not have really intended that to happen. So these are divided into two sections, like I just said. So the first one is they show reasons why our design failed. They show specific ways why our designs did not work, because users will tell you that. And at the same time, it will show you unexpected scenarios of how this system could be used. So for example, in my digital legacy curation system, this system was supposed to help users iterate their digital footprints and make it into a digital legacy after they pass away. But as they were using this system, many people said, oh, but like as I was going through this, I was so grateful of what I have right now. I'm so happy that I have these people around me, which gave them a contemplation of how happy their life is, which will lead to mental health products. So despite the fact that our initial intention was to create a legacy curation system, our system expanded to become a mental health platform as well. So these are the kind of unexpected experiences that you might be able to incorporate into your interaction design solutions. So I have brought a more vivid example of what I did in my interaction design 7 years ago, which has extended to a UX/RM project in the following semester. So this is what I did in my second year, just like you, in IID. So I'm going to show you how we conducted our user testing systems to sort of give you a sense of how this might take place. So basically, our system was, whenever a filler word occurs, the system will notify you. Even as I'm speaking, I'm noticing a lot of filler words right now. I'm using a lot of, so basically, and like, these kind of filler words hinder your speech, right? Like it's gonna, yeah, it's not really the best. It's gonna sound like you're not professional, and we usually want to get rid of these filler words when we are presenting. So we built a system where whenever the user uses this filler word when they're speaking, the system will notify them using a wearable device. So this was the very cute user scenario that we made. So you set up a device and you wear this device, and when you're speaking, you say like, and, or like maybe it could be like a swear word detecting system. You use the word like, oh, fuck. And then the system will detect that and give you a notification. And you're like, oh, shit, I used this again. And you try to like reduce that, was the basic idea of this system. So we designed an evaluation session. So what we did was we asked participants to give presentations over Zoom. When we conducted this, it was like the beginning era of COVID, I think. The testing itself did not take place in this class, but it was taken in UXRM class. So we asked participants to give presentations over Zoom, and some were given this feedback and some were not given this feedback to sort of compare how our system changes the experience. So each participant participated in 3 sessions over a course of a week, and we observed how much these filler words sort of reduced over time. So we came up with a Wizard of Oz prototype for this session. Now, does everyone know what Wizard of Oz prototype is? Show of hands. I know what Wizard of Oz is. I'm not going to tell you to explain it, so you can just like. All right, so let me explain what Wizard of Oz is. Does everyone know what like actual Wizard of Oz is? The literature piece, Wizard of Oz, Wicked, Define Gravity. No, sorry. But yeah, Wizard of Oz, basically, spoiler alert, is a wizard that lives in Oz, who is not actually a wizard, but was sitting behind a screen and using this machine to present as if he's a wizard using these machineries. And this is basically where we gain the inspiration on making these prototypes. So does everyone know why we make prototypes? Because it's expensive. To make an actual system, it's expensive, it's laborious, and we're designers. I don't know how to code. I don't want to learn how to code. It's exhausting. But we still have to test whether our design works. So what we do is we make basically the Figma prototype or whatever graphical interface that we have, and we tell users that this is a working prototype. And in the back room, there's another designer moving the system for users. So the system is actually developed, but the user will experience the system, and we don't have to put in the time and money to actually develop the system. So when the system fails, we know that we need to fix that before we actually go into the development phase. And that's why we have a prototype, and that's why Wizard of Oz works. Because for the users, it will give them the experience of actually using that system where we don't have to build that system. So we came up with the Wizard of Oz prototype for this session because back at the time, I didn't want to code, and I still don't. So in the Zoom screen, we shared a PPT slide with a black screen, and we let them present. And whenever they say, we change the screen to red, 0.5 seconds manually. And we told the users that, oh, the system is detecting you using that word, and it's giving you an automatic feedback. But they don't have to know that, right? So this was the system that we came up with. And at the end of each session, we gave them a delayed feedback of, oh, you use these words this much. So there are 2 types of feedbacks, the instant feedback and a delayed or visualized feedback. And the evaluation goal, of course, was to see if the instant feedback reduced such speech habits, and did the report, the delayed feedback, reduce such speech habits, which will lead to expected findings. This is what we wanted to see, and this is what we knew we were going to see. So we conducted these user testing sessions into 3 different groups of users. So the first group, they did not receive any kind of feedback. And the second group, they just received the delayed feedback because that one's pretty common, right? We see that pretty commonly. And then on the third group, we gave them both the report and the instant feedback. And as a result, the group 2, their filler words were reduced. And for the group 3, it was reduced much, 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 much more. So as an evaluation, it was done. The expected finding was found. Did our solution reduce like, etc.? Yes, it did. Yes, it was new. And then as for the unexpected findings, let's see what happened. And when you usually do these usability testings, you usually follow with an interview. And these unexpected findings mostly came from these interview sessions. So when we see instant feedbacks, can you imagine like giving a presentation, you're staring at a Zoom screen and it's very pitch black, and you say like, and I'm like, and then the screen changes red and it just like goes away. And you feel judged. You're like, I did not want to use the filler word, but I still did. I feel so judged. Is exactly what our users basically experienced. It was effective in terms of reducing the feedback, but users said it was so stressful. So, which leads us to the question of how will we define a good user experience? Users did want to reduce their filler usage, of course, right? But during the system usage, they felt demeaned. They were like, oh my God, I'm such a bad speech giver. But is that really a good user experience despite reaching the user's initial goals? So this added to our design space and design consideration and design requirement. Users' self-esteem during use is another important consideration that we did not know that we need to incorporate when we were conducting a user research and a design phase. And user evaluation gave us this insight to expand our system. And secondly, when given certain feedbacks, as the session went on, some users were ignoring certain feedbacks. They were intimidated at first, and then the session went on, and then they were like, you know what, I'm just not going to look at it. Or when the report was given, they were like, oh, like this word is okay. And then we asked them why. Why did you like ignore these type of feedbacks? And they were like, some filler words are good. So for Koreans like me, English is not my first language. These filler words make you seem like you're very fluent. Like it's like when you're taking, what's the test, OPIC or something, you are like asked to use it more to seem more Cali person and more fluent in terms of that. So many people are like, I actually want to use more fillers. Like these words make me sound natural. And when I'm giving speech, I want to appear natural and not so professional. So they were personalizing the system on their own end. And this also added to our design space and consideration and requirement. How will we define bad speech habits? We designed this system under the assumption that filler words are bad. But for some users, it wasn't. It was desired. So we asked the question of like, is it okay that we define that these are bad and just like impose our view of the world to the entire users? Or is this something that we need to sort of even ethically consider how it's going to happen? So yeah, after we finished this evaluation session, our expected findings of did our solution reduce unlike was yes, and our evaluation could have ended there. But because we wanted to look more towards the unexpected findings, we conducted more interviews and went into depth, which gave us the insights of these two important design spaces that we needed to consider of user stress. How will we define good UX? It is just about reaching the goal, but is it also about how users feel during the usage of those systems? And also, users ignored certain feedbacks. And how that gave us the question of how do we define a bad speech habit, and will it be universal? How is it going to be taken in a different cultural sphere? Like, do Indian people feel the same way about this filler words? And should we have a universal way of attending these speech habits? Was the unexpected findings. So cool, we finished the evaluation. And then what? We, of course, iterate the findings. And this is, so the example is done. So we're going to get back to the general ways of how we will do this. So when you're done with your evaluation, you are likely to end up with these set of things, right? You found your expected findings and your unexpected findings, basically reasons why your design failed and also unexpected experiences that will expand your designs. Now, expected finding is important. It validates your design. If our system just did not work and reduce the speech, it's not going to be a good design. But at the same time, it does not really tell you where to go on from now on. So, but the unexpected findings show what your next step should be in terms of your design. So the reasons why you failed, reasons why design failed will show you how to fix your design solutions, and the unexpected experiences will show you how to expand your design solutions. So let's go back to our examples of the speech habits. In terms of user stress, we asked the question of, is stress really desired during the sessions, and how do we minimize the stress of such instant feedbacks? And we consider maybe using sound will be less intrusive because the red light flashing in front of your eyes is very intimidating, or maybe a haptic one because our initial intention was to wear this device. So maybe it's a little less intrusive was the next step that we might have gone to. And then the fact that users ignored the feedback, we incorporated as, should we incorporate, maybe we can do like a testing session, and then we can see, we can give the users an initial feedback, and then the users can sort of choose which speech habit they want to target. And then they can personalize the system to their liking. And we also asked the question of, are universal speech on criteria really ethical? And we will come back to that last one at a later time. And with these questions, we go back to the user research and the design solution phase. So basically these questions of, is sound better? Is haptic better? Is personalization gonna work? Goes back to the phases before evaluation. We conduct user research again with these questions, and we design the systems again with this. And this is why, this is a slide from Hyun's presentation 2 weeks ago. This is why Hyun said evaluation is the lifeblood of user-centered design, because it tells you whether your user research and design requirements actually worked or not. And just based on that, it will give you your new directions, which will bring you back to the initial phase. And this goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. Basically, when you go to a design company, this will happen 24/7, all year long, to improve your product ongoingly. So to sum up, what do we look for during evaluations? We look for whether your design works. We validate our designs. Does your design successfully cater for the user needs and values that you have identified during your user research phase? And secondly, you look for reasons why your design failed. It will give you the directions on how to improve your original intention of the design. So for example, if our design did not reduce the speech, our design did not work, but our original intention was to help users reduce the fillers. So we changed our designs into a way that will help them reduce the fillers. But it worked, so we successfully validated our findings. So we didn't really do this in our example. And as for the unexpected experience, we will look for directions on novel ways in which the design can move forward. So to end, I personally think that design is never really finished, which is not ideal for you because you will have to present your findings at a finals weeks in about a month. But design always evolves like this, like what we have shown. Based on the evaluation, it will give you new directions and it will continue to evolve into something that you have even unexpected. And also design provokes discussions. This is personally my favorite part, and this is what brought me into the PhD life, sadly. So let's go back to our findings. The fact that users ignored the feedbacks gave us the question of, are universal criteria on speech ethical? Now, this might be a little out there and it might not really speak to you. So let's dig a little more deep into that. Are universal criteria on speech ethical? So these systems where we sort of quantify human bodies and human experiences are called quantified self or personal informatics. And you might be actually really familiar with these because this is one of the most prominent examples of the in-bodies or Noom coaches. So basically you work out and it tracks what you have done today and you track your calories using your food. And in terms of in-body, you use these like body fat machine and it's going to show you basically how fat you are and how skinny you are, which is demeaning. But this provokes a very important question in the human-computer interaction communities of like, is quantifying your body really ethical? This was a system that was meant to motivate people, but at the same time, it gives you numbers on how your body looks. And it gives you a distorted body image of like, this is my number. My body is a 67 out of 100, which is not really the case, right? So it gives you the question of whether it's right for us as designers to come up with a system that quantifies people's bodies and experiences because it changes people's perspectives. Before these systems came in, we worked out to be healthy and we wanted to look beautiful, or we wanted to be healthy and we just worked out based on our own goals. But when this system was introduced, our body was numbered and quantified and it was lined, and it basically changed the way we perceive our body entirely. And if we use this speech feedback system, and if we impose people and say that, oh, using and like is not a good way to give speech, will that change people's perception on speech? Was the question that we had. So there are a lot of people who suffer from stutterings or something like that. And it's not something that can be helped. But us making a system that imposes the way of speech is going to make those people stress and invalidate those experiences. So we asked the question of whether that is okay. Is it just me or is it very hot in this room? Can you turn on the AC? Is it possible? Surprisingly, it is on. You pay $7,000 a semester and it doesn't work. Yes.
Someone opened the door and did it better. I'm outside, not in the bedroom. It's fresh air.
Yes. I mean, I'm probably hot because I talk too much, but if it was okay. Thank you. See, validation matters. Anyway, so that's basically how it could go beyond into the research side. If anyone is interested in doing a research that is more HCI or STS, that's what I'm doing right now. So yeah, good evaluation guides such evolutions and discussions. It will bring you to that evaluation iteration phase, and at the same time, it gives you these interesting topics that we might want to talk about of how we want to use this design and how this changes our lives, because UX design and HCI is basically about how we bring technologies into people's lives using design. So that's pretty much it. And I hope this really helped. And what's important is that you have fun. My personal experience, interaction design, is what brought me into the world of UX and HCI. this project was literally the first project that I conducted in Yonsei with Professor Kang, and it has brought me here as a PhD student doing this. And
This class, right?
yes, in this very classroom, and all our teammate is now working as a UX researcher at like Hyundai and like NH. Actually, all 4 members are doing that. So it's pretty exciting. And it's because this project was so fun and we worked on this even after class. I'm not telling you that you have to, because you might not like your teammates, it happens. But at the same time, if this is something that really excites you, I really hope you take the time to enjoy the fun out of this, because, it's exciting, it's interesting. So that's pretty much it. My lecture was very short. It was only 30 minutes, good. And this is my webpage that you scanned before. And this is our paper that I wrote on the system. So this is basically a paper that we wrote on the system that I just introduced you to, the speech habit. And just to not intimidate you, this was written outside of classroom. Our initial product for this class was very primitive. And I went on an exchange. My team did a UXRM class to do the evaluation, and the evaluation miserably failed. So I came back, and then we did the testing again during the COVID session. And then I had to go to the military, and I wrote this paper when I was in the military. So this was not a product of this class, but it was incepted in this class. So if you look at it and you're intimidated of like, oh my God, are we expected to write this level of a paper? No, you do not have to do that. This is just to give you an idea of how project could evolve outside of class. So hopefully you can do that. That is it for the lecture. And before we move on to the break and then the feedback sessions, I want to do like a short Q&A sessions. It could be about the presentation itself. It could also be about my life as a PhD student in HCI. I've also interned at a Korean firm as a UX researcher, so I can also talk about that. And you can ask me about your IID life, because to my understanding, this was supposed to be a second-year course. So if you want to learn more about, oh, how's UXRM? How's like senior project? What did you do for capstones? And I can maybe give you some examples of what I did, and I can, basically give you the tea of what life as an IID student could be. So if there's any questions, the floor is yours. I'm going to turn the light back on.
Okay, let's get a big round of applause. You were just thinking about that. So, with Hayun, who we talked 2 weeks ago, Hayun and Sono, they actually found their new way, new life, how I say, like journey in this class. So that's why I invited them as a guest speaker. So maybe some of you might be selected. So from this class, you might find your new talent, new interest, or at least, I don't want to do it anymore. Either way, that's very good. So, feel free to ask any question to him, and he's very approachable, and his feedback is just great. So during your feedback session, each team, I want you to talk about your next kind of step. So because it's evaluation, right? So just do some discussion about how to do your evaluation, because each team's product is different. You will have different evaluation. So utilize this time with. Okay. All right. So let's again go back to the question.
Yes.
To him.
Thank you, Professor. That was very sweet.
Question about the talk. It's about graduate student life.
Or IIT life.
IID life.
Yes.
Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you for not dozing off.
And also wondering your PhD life and situation.
Oh, it's awful. Yes. Yeah, it's awful. So I'm gonna give you like a brief introduction of what I do. So this is my web page, and I thought there would be an example page I just realized that I did not upload it yet. So I'm just gonna do it verbally. So basically my research is 2-threaded. So the first thread, I juxtapose extremely human experiences like death, love, spirituality with the advancement of technology. So my project was like spiritual AI. or like digital legacy curation for young adults, or digital afterlife, reincarnation of dead people into something. And then the second line of research is queer people and LGBTQ plus people in Korea. So basically, I use a feminist, queer, participatory lens to evaluate how our design sort of fails queer reality. And then I am currently working with the parents of queer children in Korea and also displaced queer youths in Korea. So queer children who are kicked out of their houses or had to leave their homes to sort of do a design workshop and see how they use these social medias and like all these online experiences to sort of navigate their lives and how we can design systems that can better cater for that. And for both these two experiences, you can't really do that in Korea because Korea is very homophobic, so they will not fund my study. Actually, that's not true, but it's really hard to sort of present that work in a conservative country. And at the same time, these are very philosophical, given my CLC backgrounds. It doesn't really lead to a substantial system or a system that a company can buy and use. So I wanted a more liberal and open-ended world where I can pursue my graduateship. So that's why I went to the States. And in terms of that, it's really nice because it's easier for me to sort of talk about my queer identity and also discuss these projects in a more safe environment. Well, given Mr. Trump is there, it's not really safe anymore, but it's somewhat over there, and the university protects me. So there's the good part. I can really, as you can see, I'm really excited by this. So it's happy and it's fun to do these projects, but at the same time, living abroad is difficult. Like, I don't know how y'all international students are doing it in Korea, because living abroad is difficult and PhD life is demanding because there are a lot of deadlines. We need to write papers, and then there's the funding issues and everything. So it is also stressful, but it's also very rewarding. The fact that I can do, so basically for those of you who don't know how PhD life works in the States, when you go there as a PhD student, you're also hired as a graduate research assistant or graduate teaching assistant. So they will basically hire you as a staff of the university and they will pay you. And my paycheck is bigger than most Korean people's first salary because the living cost in the States is so high. So I don't really have anything left. But at the same time, even if you don't have any kind of savings to go to a graduate experience in the States, if this is something that really excites you, you will be able to make a living out of this, and you will land in a position where you can make a money out of doing these projects that doesn't really lead to money. So in terms of that, I'm really, really satisfied and grateful that I am doing this. So hopefully that was a good enough answer for you. Any other questions? And I thought that was a very fourth year student question. So maybe like sophomores can ask about, oh, how's like visual systems and yes.
Sorry, another question here. But
Good.
I wanted to ask you like how your personal experiences in CLC and IID have like helped you like navigate through research, because I'm also doing CLC.
Cool. So this is going to be a little boring for someone else, but there is a field called speculative design. Does anyone know Black Mirror? It's basically showing how technology can transpire into something that was not intended to basically ruin our lives for good. And that's a very it's a subfield that like the entire Black Mirror series was consulted by HCI professors. And that's a subfield within HCI, human-computer interaction. It's basically giving users a scenario of how technology uses can transpire into something that we have not expected. It speculates the future and gives them a scenario to sort of provoke questions. And it doesn't really have to be like a Black Mirror like a scenario. I did a project called AI Fortune Teller. This was my senior project, actually, which won the honorary mention for the Prix Ars Electronica, which is the biggest media arts festival in the world. But anyways, see, user evaluation, sorry. But this is a 13-minute video. Does anyone want to watch it? I'm gonna take that as a no. Is it a yes? I'm gonna give you like the first glimpse of this.
질문을 하면 될까요?
바로 해볼게.
첫 번째는 내가 뭘 생각해야 될 때, 메일을 쓰거나 써져 있어야
So yeah, I'm gonna like give you a commentary as we go on. So people were invited to use an AI system to Career Council, and then they just like ask their questions like this, like, oh, should I start my own business? Should I switch to a different industry? And then the AI chatbot sort of gave them the answers on how they should live their lives. And then they reacted. They're like, oh, like it really helped me. And then someone else was like, oh, it did not really help that much. So they reacted to the system. And then I asked them to sort of speculate how this AI operates. And then, of course, people did not know because they're not AI developers. And even AI developers don't know how AIs work. And then I showed them that it was not actually an AI, but in the back room, I was sitting with the Mudang, the Korean spiritual fortune teller. And then I was reading their future with this Mudang and sending a message as if I was an AI. And then, of course, people were like, holy shit. So that was the surprise part. And then, this is a long video, sorry. Yes, this was the key question. They have reacted to the AI agent in a either positive and negative way, right? And then they realized it's not actually an AI, but it was a fortune teller. Did your reaction or your evaluation of the system change? And every single participant was like, no, it did not change. And that was really interesting because we consider AI as this high-end, high-tech thing that's going to change everything. And the fortune telling is a prehistoric thing that is so unscientific. But when given with the solution, they really did not care of where this advice came from, but they just acted in a way they wanted to. So I asked them the question of whether we should really be afraid of AI or whether really we should rely so much on AI, because humans have not given a shit about what people telling us how to live, and we just live the way that we wanted to. And that was the intention of this project. We are so afraid of the AI and we're so like provoked by the AI, but at the same time, we're gonna live our lives in a way that where we hold the agency and where we have the autonomy no matter what. And this is a very literary narrative, I think. It's a story that is a combination of IID and CLC, because literature, in my opinion, is investigating and contemplating deeply on how we live our lives as humans and how we should live our lives as humans and how we have lived our lives as humans. And through technology, I ask those questions in this piece. And this is one way of sort of doing that. And in terms of like other projects that I'm doing, like spiritual AI or digital legacy curations, or even queer lives as humans, everything begins with empathizing and having an understanding of the human narratives that is behind such lives. And that's what literature does, basically. So that's how I think I bring these two together. And it's not actually a very niche concept, because my professor, Sharon Barzel, is also a comparative literature PhD. And now she is a chair of the College of Computing in Georgia Tech. So even in the United States, these literary and humanities approach towards computings and design is highly appreciated and desired. So if you're doing a CLC/IID combination, I think you can use that for your advantage. If anyone else is interested, CLC is a fantastic major. We do not have major requisites. So, and you can take like classes from English literature or like anthropology. So hopefully that was insightful. That was a very long answer. I'm sorry, I went on for a while. Any other questions? Yes.
Just about this project, I'm curious, how did you recruit the participants that appeared in the video? Like, did you recruit them yourself, or like through Microsoft chat rooms, or like did you give rewards after this whole thing?
Yes, these are all my friends. I had to use my friends because for some Christian participants, speaking to budangs or fortune tellers are strictly forbidden in terms of their religious beliefs. But in the recruiting, if I asked whether they're Christians or not, it's going to show the deception, because they're recruited saying that it's going to be an AI agent. And so I had to recruit my friends who I knew were not Christians. So that's how I did that. I did reward my participants with the personal money of my co-author. So thank you, Dongmi. And then, yeah. Why did you ask that question?
Because for our capstone projects or like any other user testing sessions, we do have to like always recruit participants who would participate in the interview or like evaluation. So I was just curious if you use your friends or like some other platforms or.
Cool. There are two things that you want to keep in mind in terms of recruiting. First one is going back to the design constraints that you might have discussed within this lecture room. If it's a natural study, like natural science research, your goal is to reach like the ultimate truth. We work under the notion that there is an ultimate truth and all research move through that, right? But because it's design research, the ultimate truth doesn't really exist. So design researchers say that, and we're also given this realistic constraints, right? We don't have the time. We need to meet the deadline. We need to have this product out. We have limited funding. So we sort of accommodate that. So we don't really care if it's not that we don't really care, but we give like a leeway of recruitment. We consider those realistic constraints as the realistic way of conducting design research, and it should also be disclosed, and it's not going to like degrade your research, first of all. And then secondly, in terms of recruitment generalization, going back to the natural science research, those findings are supposed to be generalized. Even in social science, your findings are supposed to be generalized to everyone, or at least to the group that you're conducting this research. But for design, the research is not about what is, but it is about what can be. So if we go back to the speech feedback systems that I made, I'm not intending to generalize that finding to everyone in this room. I don't see why everyone should use that system, but it gave us the possibility of how technology could spiral forward. So it's not about what is, it shows us of what can be. So generalization is not the priority in the design goal. Even if a single user says, oh my God, this is so interesting, and I found value in XYZ, then that design works for that person, and thus your design has value. So in terms of like recruitment, I don't want you to be that stressed out. And at the same time, this is my point of view of how we view design, and your evaluators for the capstones might have a different opinion. So make sure you make your presentation very defensively. But that was my experience. Hopefully it was a good answer. Any other questions? Yes?
Expanding on the previous question, I'm curious on your PhD research, because you mentioned you're researching about queer people.
Mm-hmm.
So how did you like recruit them? As because you mentioned that it is a pretty homophobic
Yes.
nation. So yeah, I'm curious how you recruited them and also recruited their parents.
Yes. I worked as a community partner of the PFLAG Korea, so parents and friends and allies of LGBTQIA people in Korea or something like that. So 성소수자 부모 모임 for those who speak Korean. They don't usually collaborate with researchers because there are cases of research exploitation. And that means researchers go in and they interact with participants saying that, oh, we're going to make this beautiful technology that's going to change your life. And then they conduct interviews and they leave. So they exploit these participants and they don't really like give them what they desired beyond like the compensations is what happens. And even for like the PFLAG people, there were cases where a researcher approached them guised as a queer-friendly person, and they did a research and they wrote a paper that is extremely homophobic. So they were very, very defensive in terms of collaborating and like helping me recruit participants. So basically what I did was I called them a lot of times and I attended their meetings regularly to sort of build that rapport. And then I befriended a lot of people there. I'm still engaging with the community partners, even after the research is done. So that's one way of it. Like you need to be genuine and you need to empathize with those community partners and show that you're not there to like exploit and like finish your dissertation, but you actually genuinely care about that research and you connect with the participants. And me being gay also helped. And also for the queer youths, I'm currently working with Ding Dong. So this is a displaced queer youth community center. So I also had a multiple meeting with them over Zoom. And we connected really deeply. I attended a forum for queer people last Sunday, and I also attended a session with them. And I'm like constantly talking with them, constantly working with them, asking them if there is anything that I can do. And then that sort of helped me getting my way into that community. So if you're looking into participating, not just with queer people, but any kind of vulnerable population, which is something that a lot of IID students are actually interested in. For example, Hyun is currently working with the North Korean defectors, and she had to like fly from UK to Korea like once every month to actually make that meeting happen. You have to sort of connect with those community partners and make your way in to empathize with them and build rapport and be genuine. So yeah, that's my way of going in. And I think it's a really meaningful work if you want to work with a vulnerable population. But at the same time, because you're working with such a vulnerable population, you're also in a vulnerable population. You need to protect yourself. So yeah, be on the lookout for that as well. Hope that helped. Any other questions? I tend to yap if no one stops me. So maybe one last question and then we can go into the break. Yes.
Just have a question about internship.
Mm-hmm.
So I heard that you did internship in Korea.
Yes.
And do you have like any tips in passing the interview or like applying with the resume?
I'm not the best person to discuss this because I applied to more than 11 and I have miserably failed on getting everything. And I was just recruited by one. And it was actually 오늘의 and then I was a UX researcher. And if you go to like 오늘의 or O House, you can look at the 3D interior simulation kind of thing. And I was a user researcher for that, one of the 2 user researchers for that. And I think the recruitment differs by every company. But the way that I got in was they saw in the resume that I studied UX research and I have done projects before, which is not they expect to see in a lot of undergraduate students. So that's basically your strong suit. And I went into the interview and then the CEO came in and then he was like, why do you want to do UX? And then I answered with like a one-line question of, I want to change people's lives and that's why I do design. And then that sort of really resonated with the CEO of like why we do startups and like why we make this. And I think that was like the big push on how I got into the internship. So I had a great time, but at the same time, there aren't a lot of UX research positions for undergraduate students realistically in the Korean atmosphere. And even if you do get in, you're not really a UX researcher, but you're more of we call them UI machines. So you're like stuck into Figma and you're just like printing these UIs. So I think it really depends on what kind of companies that you apply for. And when you read the recruitment form, you're going to see what they expect of you. And if it contains a certain level of what you find as your strong suit, maybe you're good at like prototyping, maybe you're good at user research. In my case, I was good at user research. And this particular position was in the beginning phase of the product design, so they needed a user researcher. So I think that's really a good fit that took place. But yeah, in terms of like internship or getting a job or going to a graduate school, it's not like university admissions. University admissions, they line you up and they cut you up at a certain point and you're like admitted. But in terms of like getting a job or a position or an internship, there's a very specific need from the companies. So even if you don't get in, it's not because you're not good, but it's because there wasn't a right fit for you at that round. So even if you are not having a good time at a job market right now, or if you're in an internship market and you're like dejected, I hope you keep on trying because I know all IID students are very, very good at what they do. And even if you do like the bare minimum at IID, you're better than most like design students in other school, in my personal opinion. So yeah, so keep on trying. Make sure to discover what your strongest suit is and see if your strong suit aligns with the recruitment form, and make sure you appeal that during an interview or the writing, which I think is a very basic answer that I can give, but that's my experience. So hopefully it helped. And if there's any more questions, please find me during the break. It's 2:55 right now. So let's take a 15-minute break until 3:10. And then I will go team by team to sort of listen to what you're doing right now and give you individual feedbacks. Thank you.